Wednesday evening, December 18th, the Trump administration announced an $11.1 billion arms sale to Taiwan, the largest single weapons package in history to the island. 82 HIMARS rocket systems, 420 ATACMS missiles, 60 self-propelled howitzers, over $1 billion in drones, Javelin anti-tank missiles, military software, Harpoon upgrades, 8 separate contracts, all designed to transform Taiwan into what the Pentagon calls an asymmetric defensive force capable of making a Chinese invasion prohibitively costly. Taiwan thanked the United States. China condemned it within hours, warning that America is turning Taiwan into a powder keg and pushing the strait toward military confrontation. The State Department issued the usual reassurances about supporting Taiwan's ability to defend itself, and the American public, distracted by domestic politics and holiday shopping, barely noticed what may be the most consequential foreign policy decision of the year. Because this is not about helping an ally. This is about a strategic gamble that could lead directly to a war with China that the United States is not prepared to fight. And the people making this decision are not being honest about what it actually means. Let me state the facts plainly. Taiwan is an island 100 miles off the coast of China, 24 million people, the size of Maryland. It sits within range of thousands of Chinese missiles specifically positioned to strike every military base, every port, every airfield on the island. The People's Liberation Army has over 2 million active personnel. The PLA Navy is now the world's largest by hull count, with massive amphibious assault capability built explicitly for a Taiwan scenario. China considers Taiwan a core national interest. Xi Jinping has stated repeatedly that reunification is inevitable and that force will not be ruled out. The United States is 7,000 miles away. Forward bases in Japan and Guam could respond within days, but full American military power would take weeks to deploy. And here is the part no one wants to say out loud. Defending Taiwan against a determined Chinese assault would be the most dangerous military operation the United States has attempted since World War II. Not Iraq, not Afghanistan, not Vietnam. This would be high-intensity conventional warfare against a nuclear-armed peer competitor with the industrial capacity to replace losses faster than America can. So when Washington announces $11 billion in arms sales, the question is not whether Taiwan deserves support. The question is whether this support reflects actual American capability and genuine willingness to go to war, or whether it is a dangerous bluff that Xi Jinping might one day call with catastrophic consequences. Look at what is actually being sold. HIMARS and ATACMS are the same systems that proved effective in Ukraine against Russia. Mobile, long-range, precision strike. In theory, Taiwan could use these to hit PLA staging areas, logistics hubs, even airfields on the mainland. The 60 Paladins provide mobile artillery that can shoot and move before Chinese counter-battery fire locates them. The drones enable reconnaissance and strike operations. The software integrates all of this into a networked battlefield management system. The strategy is clear. Taiwan cannot match China's numbers or overall firepower. So instead, make invasions so bloody and expensive that Beijing reconsiders. Force the PLA to fight for every beachhead. Destroy landing craft before they reach shore. Hit logistics. Turn any invasion into a grinding, costly disaster. It worked for Ukraine in the opening phases against Russia. The question is whether Taiwan is Ukraine and whether the circumstances are remotely comparable. They are not. Ukraine had months of warning. NATO intelligence tracked Russian buildups. Ukraine mobilized reserves, dispersed forces, stockpiled ammunition. Ukraine has strategic depth. When Russian forces pushed toward Kyiv, Ukrainian units fell back, regrouped, counterattacked. Ukraine has land borders with NATO allies who provided safe havens, logistics support, training facilities. And critically, Russia's military, despite its size, proved far less capable than Western intelligence assessed. Taiwan has none of these advantages. No strategic depth, no fallback positions, no land borders. If China achieves air and naval superiority around Taiwan, which they likely would within 72 hours, the island is isolated. No reinforcements, no resupply. Every weapon Taiwan possesses at the start is all they get. HIMARS needs ammunition. It needs maintenance. It needs trained crews. It needs an intact logistics network to move around the battlefield. All of that becomes nearly impossible when your enemy controls the air and sea. And here's the real problem. These precision weapons require targeting data. In Ukraine, the United States and NATO provide real-time intelligence through satellites, reconnaissance aircraft, signals intelligence. Ukrainian forces know where Russian units are. They know what to hit. Taiwan would need the same support. But providing that support in a conflict with China means American satellites, American reconnaissance platforms, American intelligence networks become legitimate military targets. The United States would not just be supplying weapons. The United States would be a combatant. This is the fundamental contradiction. Trump's administration is simultaneously pursuing closer trade relations with China while arming Taiwan to resist Chinese military action. Trump himself has praised Xi Jinping. He wants trade deals. He has expressed skepticism about foreign commitments. Yet here is his administration approving the largest arms sale to Taiwan in history, a move Beijing views as a direct threat and a violation of the One China policy that has managed this issue for 50 years. That policy, established in 1972, acknowledges One China and that Taiwan is part of China, while maintaining unofficial relations with Taiwan and providing for its defense. Carefully constructed ambiguity. China tolerates American arms sales within limits because the alternative, immediate military action, risks war with the United States. But there are limits. And $11 billion in offensive systems that can strike the mainland tests those limits in unprecedented ways. China's foreign ministry made this explicit. The arms sale seriously violates China's sovereignty, security, and territorial integrity. Taiwan is squandering its people's money to buy weapons that turn the island into a powder keg. This pushes the Taiwan Strait toward military confrontation and war. This is not diplomatic theater. This is Beijing signaling that consequences are coming. So why is Trump doing this? 3 possibilities. 1. Signaling to China hawks in Congress that he is serious about countering China despite his trade rhetoric. Taiwan has bipartisan support. This plays well politically. 2. Using Taiwan as leverage in broader negotiations with Beijing. Create pressure, then offer to relieve it for concessions on trade or technology. Classic Trump negotiating. The risk is that she does not negotiate the same way and views this as provocation requiring response, not a bargaining position. 3. And most concerning, the administration genuinely believes Taiwan is defensible and is willing to fight China if necessary. If that is true, Americans deserve an honest conversation about what that commitment means. Because defending Taiwan would not be another Gulf War. It would be the most intense conventional conflict since 1945 against a nuclear-armed adversary with industrial capacity and the ability to strike American bases, ships, and potentially the homeland. Be honest about what war over Taiwan would look like. China has spent 25 years preparing for exactly this scenario. Anti-access, area denial capabilities designed to keep American forces out of the Western Pacific. DF-21 and DF-26 anti-ship ballistic missiles that can hit carriers from over 1,000 miles away. Artificial islands in the South China Sea turned into unsinkable aircraft carriers with radar, missiles, airstrips. Massive investment in cyber warfare, electronic warfare, anti-satellite weapons designed to blind American command and control. In the opening hours, American bases in Japan, Okinawa, Guam come under sustained missile attack. Hundreds of ballistic and cruise missiles targeting runways, fuel depots, ammunition storage. American carriers, the backbone of Pacific power, forced to operate far from Taiwan to avoid missile threats, reducing their effectiveness. American satellites providing communications, navigation, reconnaissance could be jammed or destroyed. GPS that every weapon relies on could be denied entirely in theater. Even if American forces defend against initial strikes and establish air superiority, sustaining that requires logistics unlike anything since World War II. Every bomb, missile, gallon of fuel transported across thousands of miles of ocean through waters contested by Chinese submarines and surface ships. Casualties would be high. Ships sunk. Aircraft lost. No guarantee of victory. China replaces losses faster than America can. Chinese shipyards build vessels at a pace American industry has not matched in 70 years. Then the nuclear dimension. China possesses several hundred warheads with growing delivery systems. Traditional no-first-use policy, but not ironclad. If ATACMS missiles from American-supplied systems start hitting targets inside China, how does Beijing distinguish between conventional strikes and potential nuclear first strike? How do you prevent miscalculation under extreme pressure, incomplete information, fog of war? The nightmare scenario is not decisive victory for either side. It is prolonged, inconclusive conflict that escalates beyond anyone's control. Chinese assault establishes a foothold but bogs down in urban warfare. American forces impose blockade on Chinese shipping, crippling their economy. Chinese retaliation against American logistics, satellites, forward bases. Both sides suffering massive losses with no resolution. And eventually, someone decides the only way to break the stalemate is to escalate toward weapons and tactics that were supposed to stay off the table. This is why the $11 billion sale is so dangerous. Not because Taiwan does not deserve support, not because China's threats should be ignored, but because this assumes a level of American capability and political resolve that may not exist. It assumes deterrence works indefinitely. It assumes if deterrence fails, America can successfully defend Taiwan without politically unsustainable costs. It assumes the American people are willing to risk major war with a nuclear power over an island most cannot locate on a map. None of those assumptions are clearly true. American military readiness is strained after 2 decades of Middle East counterinsurgency. Defense industrial base atrophied. Ammunition stockpiles depleted from Ukraine shipments. Recruitment down. Navy struggles with aging fleet readiness. Air Force faces pilot shortages and maintenance backlogs. These are material limitations that directly affect the ability to execute high-intensity warfare defending Taiwan requires. More fundamentally, political will. Americans are exhausted from foreign wars. Iraq and Afghanistan cost trillions and thousands of lives with ambiguous results. Profound skepticism about new military commitments. Taiwan matters for semiconductors and regional stability. But is it worth tens of thousands of American casualties? Worth economic disruption from war with our largest trading partner? Worth any risk of nuclear escalation? The Trump administration is not asking these questions publicly. The message is simple. We support Taiwan. We provide weapons. China should not test our resolve. That may sound strong, but if China decides peaceful reunification is impossible and military action is the only option, those statements need to translate into actual military action. Ships sail into harm's way. Aircraft fly combat missions. Young Americans risk their lives. The American people will demand answers to questions that should have been addressed before the arms sale was approved. Taiwan welcomes American support. President Lai announced $40 billion in additional defense spending through 2033. Taiwan invests in asymmetric capabilities, fortifies defenses, tries to make invasion as costly as possible. But Taiwan knows its survival depends entirely on American intervention. Without U.S. Navy and Air Force, Taiwan cannot hold out more than weeks, possibly days, against full-scale assault. The weapons help, but are not decisive. What matters is whether American forces actually show up when shooting starts. And that is the wager. That threat of intervention deters China indefinitely. That weapons in Taiwanese hands make invasion unthinkable. That Beijing accepts the status quo rather than risk war. Maybe the wager is correct. Maybe she looks at costs and concludes it is not worth it. Maybe internal Chinese pressures, economic stagnation, demographics, delay any decision until the window closes. Or maybe not. Maybe she concludes time is not on China's side. American resolve weakening. Pentagon distracted by Europe and Middle East commitments. The 2026 or 2028 window is the last opportunity before Taiwan's defenses and American capabilities become truly formidable. Maybe he acts sooner, while America is still reorienting strategy and rebuilding after decades of Middle East focus. If that happens, the $11 billion in arms will not have prevented war. It will have contributed to conditions that made war more likely. This is not an argument for abandoning Taiwan. It is an argument for honesty about what defending Taiwan requires and whether America is prepared to pay that price. If yes, if Americans genuinely believe Taiwan's security is worth risking war with China, then strategy needs to match commitment. More than arms sales, forward deployed forces, explicit defense guarantees, permanent basing, massive investment and capabilities needed to prevail. rebuild defense industrial base, frank conversations with allies about burden sharing. If America is not actually willing to fight over Taiwan, current strategy is worse than useless, creates illusion of commitment without substance, encourages Taiwan to believe it has a protector that may not materialize, antagonizes China without deterring action, increases likelihood of miscalculation where Beijing concludes American resolve is hollow and calls the bluff, discovering too late that forces do respond, triggering unwanted war. Right now, American strategy exists in dangerous middle ground. Enough support to anger China, not enough to truly deter. Enough ambiguity to avoid clear commitment. Not enough clarity to prevent miscalculation. Each year, as China's military grows stronger and more confident, that middle ground becomes more unstable. The ambiguity that preserved status quo for 50 years will eventually fail. When it does, consequences will be catastrophic, not because anyone wanted war, but because everyone believed their own rhetoric and no one confronted hard truths about what defending Taiwan actually means. The $11 billion sale is not a solution. It is postponement. Buys time. Maybe a few years, maybe less. But time for what? Time to build Taiwan's defenses until invasion truly is impossible? Unlikely. Time to negotiate political settlement China accepts? Also unlikely given Beijing's position. Time for internal Chinese changes to make reunification less urgent? Possible, but beyond American control. Or simply time for the problem to become someone else's responsibility. That is the real question Americans should ask. Not whether we support Taiwan, but what happens when support is not enough. When deterrence fails. When decades of ambiguity collapse into clarity of actual conflict. And whether, when that moment comes, the United States has capability, will, and wisdom to navigate a crisis that could define this century the way 2 world wars defined the last. A war over Taiwan would not be limited conflict, not police action, not humanitarian intervention, great power war in the nuclear age. The $11 billion in weapons being shipped may one day be used not to prevent that war, but to fight it. The question every American should ask is whether we are truly prepared for that reality or whether we are simply hoping it never arrives. Because hope is not strategy, and the bills for failed strategy are paid in blood.